For centuries, the Ladosian Empire terrorized the galaxy, subjugating or exterminating countless alien races with their advanced tech and psionic abilities. But they made one fatal mistake. They woke the humans. The galaxy was a very different place before the humans went to sleep. Overpopulation, pollution, and resource depletion had ravaged Earth, forcing humanity to build massive colony ships and enter cryostasis, dreaming of new worlds to call home. But while they slumbered, the ruthless Ladosians rose to power under Emperor Janus. Planet after planet, species after species fell before their might. Alien civilizations were enslaved, their technology stolen, their people used as disposable pawns in the Ladosians' endless conquests. Those who resisted were annihilated, their worlds razed, their cultures erased from history. The galaxy languished under Janus's brutal reign. Then a Ladosian war fleet stumbled upon the human sleeper ships. Janus saw a primitive species ripe for conquest, a tool to exploit and discard. He ordered the humans' annihilation. But there was one thing Janus didn't anticipate: the resilience of the human spirit. Former Marine Will Bennett is jolted awake as klaxons blare, and the ship's AI screams warnings of incoming hostiles. He and a skeleton crew are revived to find themselves facing a massive Ladosian armada, hell-bent on wiping out the last humans. Cut off from the still-sleeping colony ships and hopelessly outgunned, Will and his ragtag band have no choice but to fight. Mining lasers become cannons, ore haulers become battering rams, and EVA suits become power armor as the humans retrofit their gear into weapons of war. In a desperate bid for survival, they bring the fight to the Ladosians. And when human-modified mining drones punch through Ladosian shields, when Rail's guns rip open their hulls, when human marines in jury-rigged battlesuits slaughter Ladosian soldiers, the galaxy takes notice. For the first time in living memory, someone is beating the Ladosians. The humans, against all odds, are winning. As word spreads of this impossible resistance, a spark of hope ignites in the Ladosian slave races. Whispers become defiant speech, and speech becomes action as long-suppressed rebellions flare to life across Ladosian space. His fists slamming into his throne, Janus flies into a rage at this defiance. He vows to snuff out humanity and their fledgling rebellion no matter the cost. Every ship, every soldier, every terrible weapon in the Ladosian war machine is turned against the humans and their allies. Will and his people find themselves in a desperate race against time and a foe that has never known defeat. They must hold the line against the full might of the Ladosian Empire to give their sleeping brethren a chance to wake and join the fight. Because if they fall, there will be no one left to stop Janus from sweeping humanity into the ash heap of galactic history. But if they can weather the onslaught, if they can rally the downtrodden races of the galaxy, then the Ladosians' reign of terror will finally face a power they cannot overcome, the indomitable human spirit. Sweat beads on Will's brow as he works frantically to revive more of his fellow humans from cryosleep. Each pod he activates feels like a small victory against the looming Ladosian threat. Among those he manages to wake are Dr. Evelyn Chen, a brilliant xenobiologist whose knowledge of alien species could prove invaluable, and Colonel Marcus Rivera, Will's former commanding officer and a seasoned tactician. As the groggy survivors gather in the cramped command center, Will briefs them on the dire situation. "We need a game changer," he says, his voice gruff with exhaustion and stress. "And I think I know how we can get one." He lays out his daring plan: infiltrate a Ladosian outpost, hack their systems, and steal critical intel on Emperor Janus's battle plans. It's a long shot, but it's the best chance they have. Using the colony ship's outdated databases, they identify a Ladosian supply freighter headed towards the outpost. Will assembles a strike team, and they set out in a jury-rigged shuttle to intercept it. The freighter looms ahead, dripping with weapons. Will's hands clench on the controls as he maneuvers their shuttle into the freighter's blind spot. They manage to latch onto the hull without detection, and the strike team slips aboard, nerves stretched taut. The outpost is a looming structure of metal and glass, crawling with Ladosian troops. Will signals for the team to split up. He and Evelyn head for the main data vault, while Marcus and the others peel off to plant explosives as a diversion. Will's heart pounds as he and Evelyn creep through the eerily silent corridors. They reach the data vault, and Evelyn gets to work hacking the systems, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "I'm in," she whispers after an eternity. They begin downloading data, the progress bar crawling agonizingly slowly. Fleet movements, slave labor camps, key facilities. It's a trove of invaluable intel. Just as the download completes, alarms shatter the silence. "They've detected us!" Evelyn shouts. Will grabs the data drive and slams his fist into the nearest alarm panel. "Run!" They sprint through the outpost, Ladosian troops converging on their location. A plasma bolt sizzles past Will's ear, and he returns fire, his pulse rifle bucking in his hands. The ground suddenly heaves as explosions tear through the outpost, Marcus and his team unleashing their distraction. Fire and debris rain down, and in the chaos, Will spots their chance. "There!" he yells, pointing to a Ladosian shuttle in a nearby hangar. They fight their way to it, dodging plasma and falling rubble. Will leaps into the pilot seat, firing up the engines as Evelyn and the others pile in. Ladosian troops pour into the hangar, weapons blazing, but Will guns the engines and blasts the shuttle out into open space. Back on the colony ships, the strike team pores over the stolen data, looking for anything that could give them an edge. Evelyn suddenly sits bolt upright, her face draining of color. "What is it?" Will asks, dread coiling in his gut. "Janus," Evelyn swallows hard. "He's building a planet killer, a weapon to wipe out our fleet." A grim silence falls over the room. Will clenches his fists, a cold purpose settling over him. "Where?" Evelyn scans the data. The components are being transported on a heavily guarded supply route, headed for a hidden construction site. Will's mind races. If they could intercept that convoy, steal those components, they could turn Janus's own weapon against him, upgrade their ships, even the odds. It's a desperate play, suicidal even, but what choice do they have? "Get me everything we have on that supply route," Will orders, his voice hardening with determination. "We're going to hit them where it hurts." Failure is not an option. The fate of not just humanity, but every enslaved species in the galaxy hinges on their next move. As the colony ships hum to life around him, Will feels the weight of billions of lives settling on his shoulders. This is it. Humanity's last stand. And come hell or high water, Will is going to make sure they give the Ladosians a fight they'll never forget. Will Bennett squinted at the holographic map, his finger tracing the winding supply route through the canyons. "There," he said, tapping a narrow section. "That's our best shot." Colonel Marcus Rivera nodded grimly. "Risky as hell, but it's our only play. How soon can we move?" 2 days to prep," Will replied. "We'll need every second." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Will handpicked his ground team, drilling them relentlessly on the plan. They'd have one shot to get this right. As the deadline approached, Will led his team to the ambush site. They moved under cover of darkness, planting charges along the canyon walls. Will's heart pounded as a Ladosian patrol passed just meters away, but they remained undetected. Meanwhile, Marcus oversaw final preparations on their ragtag fleet. Retrofitted mining ships and cobbled-together fighters. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. The day of the ambush arrived. Will's team lay in wait, pulses racing. The first Ladosian ships appeared on the horizon. Will keyed his comm. "Stand by!" The convoy entered the canyon. Will took a deep breath and hit the detonator. The charges exploded, unleashing an avalanche of rock and debris. The front and rear of the convoy disappeared under the deluge. For a moment, silence, then all hell broke loose. Ladosian energy weapons lit up the canyon, blasting away at the rockfall. Will's team sprang into action, opening fire from hidden positions. The element of surprise gave them an edge, but the Ladosians' superior tech and psionic abilities quickly turned the tide. Just as the humans were about to be overwhelmed, Marcus's ships burst from the asteroid field. Mining lasers and makeshift railguns tore into the Ladosian escort vessels. The battle raged in space and on the ground. Will led a push towards the transport carrying the weapon components, but a wall of psionic energy threw them back. He gritted his teeth, searching for a way through. Suddenly, Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. "This is it, old friend. Give 'em hell for me." Will's eyes widened as he saw Marcus's ship, trailing fire and debris, plow into the largest Ladosian cruiser. The resulting explosion rocked the entire canyon. "Now!" Will roared, leading a final desperate charge. They fought their way to the transport, Will's hands shaking as he secured the weapon components. As Ladosian reinforcements appeared on sensors, the battered human forces retreated into the asteroids. Will looked around at the haggard, bloodied faces of his team. So many empty seats, so many friends lost. Back at the colony ships, a grim silence fell as Will played the message from Emperor Janus. The Ladosian leader's eyes blazed with hate as he spat out his threats of vengeance. Will clenched his fists. They'd struck a blow, but at a terrible cost. And now the full might of the Ladosian Empire was bearing down on them. He turned to his weary crew. "I know how we can end this," he said quietly, "but it'll be the biggest gamble yet." All eyes were on him as Will laid out his plan to strike at the heart of Ladosian power, their psionic amplifier network. It was a suicide mission, but they were out of options. Will looked around the room, seeing commitment replace despair in the eyes of his people. They'd come too far to give up now. "Let's finish this," he growled. Will's eyes widened as he stared at the view screen, his heart pounding. The stolen planet killer components lay forgotten as Emperor Janus's face filled the display, twisted with rage. "You insignificant vermin," Janus snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Did you truly believe you could defy the might of the Ladosian Empire? I will crush your pathetic species beneath my heel. Your worlds will burn, your people will scream, and I will savor every moment of your extinction." The message cut off, plunging the command center into silence. Will's fists clenched as he fought to control the fear threatening to overwhelm him. Dr. Evelyn Chen's voice broke the quiet. "Will, I found something." Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, bringing up schematics and data streams. "The Ladosians, their psionic abilities aren't entirely natural. They're amplified by a network of massive stations throughout their territory." Will leaned in, studying the information. "Can we use this?" Evelyn nodded. "If we could take out even one of these amplifiers, it would significantly weaken their capabilities. But," she hesitated, "it would be deep in enemy space, nearly impossible to reach." Will's mind raced. It was a long shot, but what choice did they have? He turned to address the gathered leadership, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to propose. "We hit them where it hurts," he said. "A small team posing as miners. We find one of these amplifiers and we blow it to hell." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. "It's suicide," someone protested. "Maybe," Will agreed, "but it's our only shot at evening the odds." Hours of heated debate followed, but in the end, Will's plan was approved. A strike team was assembled, and their ships were hastily disguised as battered mining vessels. As they prepared to depart, Evelyn pulled Will aside. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "You'll need my expertise to navigate their systems." Will started to protest, but the persistence in her eyes silenced him. He simply nodded. The journey into Ladosian space was nerve-wracking. Will's palms were slick with sweat as he piloted their clunky ore hauler past yet another patrol. They'd had more close calls than he cared to count, relying on a combination of quick thinking and sheer luck to avoid detection. Finally, they reached their target, a heavily fortified planet housing one of the primary Sci amplifier hubs. Will took a deep breath, keying the comm. "All right, people, this is it. Remember your cover stories." Using the intel Evelyn had gleaned from the stolen data, they managed to bluff their way through the outer security cordon. Will's heart was in his throat as they touched down near the amplifier complex. But their luck couldn't hold forever. As they made their way deeper into the facility, Alarms suddenly blared. "Intruders! Detected in Sector 7!" A voice boomed over the speakers. "Shit," Will cursed. He turned to his team. "Change of plans. Alpha team with me. We're going for the reactor core. The rest of you, buy us time." The complex erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Ladosian shock troops poured in from every direction. Will led his strike team through the winding corridors, relying on Evelyn's directions to navigate the labyrinth. They reached the reactor core, but the losses had been staggering. Will's hands shook as he planted the high-yield explosives, the sounds of battle echoing from nearby. "Charges set," he yelled. "Everyone out now!" They sprinted for the exit, plasma fire nipping at their heels. Will dove into their makeshift escape craft just as the first explosions rocked the facility. The ship lurched into the air, climbing rapidly as the PSI amplifier hub erupted in a massive fireball behind them. For a moment, elation filled the cockpit. They'd done it. They'd struck a blow against the seemingly invincible Ladosians. But as they rendezvoused with their hidden ships in high orbit, that elation turned to dread. A massive Ladosian battle group dropped out of warp, their weapons already charging. And there, decloaking at point-blank range, was Emperor Janus's flagship, a city-sized monstrosity jam-packed with enough firepower to vaporize planets. Will's blood ran cold as he realized the terrible truth. Somehow Janus had anticipated their attack, and now there was nowhere left to run. Will's hands gripped the control yoke, squeezing hard as he watched the massive Ladosian battle group materialize before them. His stomach dropped at the sight of Janus's city-sized flagship, its weapons already charging. "All ships, defensive formation Omega," Will barked into the comm. "Deploy missile drones and gun platforms. We need to buy time for the evacuation." The human fleet scrambled to obey, their meager forces arranging themselves in a protective sphere around the vulnerable colony ships. Will's eyes darted across the tactical display as he coordinated the deployment of their automated defenses. A blinding flash erupted as the Ladosian vanguard unleashed its first salvo. Psionic warheads screamed towards the human lines, their energy signatures making the sensors shriek in protest. "Brace for impact!" Will shouted. The warheads slammed into the human formation. Will watched in horror as 3 freighters simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant by the alien weaponry. Screams and frantic status reports flooded the comms. "Status report!" Will demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We've lost the Artemis, Heracles, and Orion," a tactical officer responded, her voice shaking. "Shields at 62% across the remaining fleet." Will's eyes narrowed as he studied Janus's flagship. It hung back from the main battle, crackling with ominous energies that made every instrument on Will's bridge flare with warnings. "Sir," his XO said, "the dreadnought, it's just sitting there. Why aren't they pressing the attack?" Will's teeth clenched. He's toying with us, savoring the moment. A plan formed in Will's mind. It was desperate, possibly suicidal, but they were out of options. "All fighter squadrons, form up on me," Will ordered, strapping himself into the pilot's seat of his command fighter. "We're going to run interference while the carriers make a short-range warp jump. On my mark." Will led his fighters in a series of daring strafing runs and feints, drawing Ladosian fire away from the lumbering carriers as they charged their warp drives. For a moment, it seemed to be working. Then everything went to hell. The carriers emerged from their jump directly into a wall of Ladosian fire. Janus had anticipated their move perfectly. Lance beams lashed out from the enemy flagship, carving through human ships with terrifying precision. "All units, make for the dreadnought," Will roared. "Throw everything we've got at that bastard." Fighters and drones swarmed towards Janus's titanic vessel, unleashing a barrage of torpedoes and missiles. Most were obliterated by the ship's point defenses, but in the chaos, a single corvette slipped through. Will's breath caught as he recognized the ship. "Evelyn!" The corvette streaked towards the dreadnought's exposed flank, engines screaming as it accelerated to suicidal speeds. Will's sensors registered an impossibly powerful energy signature aboard the small craft. the jerry-rigged planet-killer bomb. A blinding flash erupted as the corvette rammed into Janus's flagship. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a massive explosion tore through the dreadnought's hull, ripping a gaping wound in its seemingly impervious armor. Will's eyes widened in disbelief. They'd done it. They'd actually hurt the bastard. "All fighters on me!" Will shouted, yanking his stick towards the breach. "We've got one shot at this. Hit that opening with everything you've got." Will led his remaining squadrons on a desperate attack run, straight into the maw of the wounded Leviathan. As they plunged into the fiery breach, Will sent up a silent prayer for Evelyn, hoping against hope that she'd somehow survived. Will's voice crackled over the comm, raw and desperate. "All units, this is our shot. Full attack on that breach." Fighters and drones surged forward, engines screaming as they plunged into the gaping wound of the Ladosian dreadnought. Will's hands danced over his controls, leading the charge. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked ahead, slamming into exposed conduits and bulkheads. The dreadnought's interior became a maelstrom of destruction. Fires raged unchecked through corridors as the human forces tore deeper into the ship's vital systems. Ladosian crew members were sucked into the void, their screams silent in the vacuum of space. Suddenly, Will's sensors shrieked a warning. A wave of psionic energy erupted from the heart of the ship, so intense it made his teeth ache. Emperor Janus's fury manifested as arcs of crackling power that lashed out indiscriminately. "Evasive maneuvers!" Will shouted, but it was too late. A tendril of psionic fire slammed into his fighter. The cockpit canopy shattered, exposing Will to the vacuum. Searing pain engulfed him as the alien energies scorched his flesh. He fought to maintain consciousness, his lungs burning as he gasped for air that wasn't there. Through blurred vision, Will saw the ship's reactor core ahead. His fingers, numb and clumsy, found the torpedo release. He unleashed everything he had left, watching the warheads streak towards their target. As explosions bloomed within the dreadnought's heart, Will's hand found the ejection lever. He was thrown clear of his disintegrating fighter, tumbling into the void. Dr. Chen watched in horror from her battered corvette as the impossible unfolded before her. The dreadnought's Psi reactors went critical, unleashing a cataclysmic blast that consumed everything in its path. Human ships, Ladosian vessels, all were vaporized in an instant. When the hellish glare faded, Chen found herself adrift in an eerie silence. Her escape pod spun lazily among the scattered debris of what had been two mighty fleets. The dreadnought was simply gone. Her instruments flickered to life, picking up scattered transmissions. Ladosian ships, those few that remained, broadcast panicked messages. One phrase repeated over and over. "Emperor Janus is dead. The Emperor is dead. All hail Emperor Cronshu." Chen's heart raced as she processed the implications. They'd done it. They'd struck a crippling blow against their seemingly invincible enemy. A shadow fell across her pod. Chen looked up to see a Ladosian heavy cruiser looming over her, its missile tubes yawning open. She held her breath, waiting for the end. The cruiser's weapons powered up, targeting her defenseless craft. The Ladosian heavy cruiser loomed over Dr. Evelyn Chen's escape pod, its weapon ports glowing with deadly intent. Her heart raced as she braced for obliteration. Suddenly, a battered human fighter swooped between them, its hull scorched and sparking. "Will?" Evelyn gasped, recognizing the fighter's markings. The comm crackled to life. Will's voice, strained but alive, filled her pod. He broadcast on all frequencies, switching rapidly between Earth languages and alien tongues. "This is Commander William Bennett of the Human Alliance. Emperor Janus is dead by our hand. Any further aggression against us will be met with overwhelming force. Your empire is leaderless. Stand down now." Tense seconds ticked by. Evelyn held her breath, watching the cruiser's weapons flicker uncertainly. A deep guttural voice responded in low terminus. "This is Fleet Admiral Cronshu. Your victory is unexpected. Perhaps we should discuss terms." Will's fighter drifted closer to Evelyn's pod. "I'm open to negotiation, Admiral. But first, we recover our people. Agreed, Cronshu rumbled. A ceasefire then, until reinforcements arrive. Hours later, aboard the human colony ship, Evelyn watched as they laid Colonel Rivera's body to rest. Will stood at attention, his face a mask of exhaustion and grief. When the ceremony ended, he addressed the gathered council members. We've struck a blow they never expected, Will said, his voice hoarse. But this is nowhere near the end. Cronshu wants to talk peace. It may be our only chance. The council chamber erupted in heated debate. Evelyn caught snippets of argument. Can't trust them. What choice do we have? It's a trap. Will raised his hands for silence. I know the risks, but I've seen their fleet. If we don't take this chance, we won't survive what comes next. Reluctantly, the council agreed. Will turned to Evelyn. Dr. Chen, I need you with me. Your expertise could make the difference. Evelyn nodded, trying to quell the fear in her gut. I'm ready. They boarded a shuttle bound for Cronshu's cruiser under heavy guard. As they approached the alien vessel, Evelyn marveled at its biomechanical design, so alien, yet undeniably advanced. They were escorted to a cavernous chamber deep within the ship. Evelyn's breath caught as she saw the Ladosians up close for the first time. Towering bipeds with ridged exoskeletons, their eyes glowed with barely contained psionic energy. At the center stood Cronshu, his presence dominating the room. He fixed Will with an unblinking stare. Commander Bennett, Cronshu's voice reverberated through the chamber. Your tactics were impressive. You've earned the right to be heard. Will stepped forward, back straight despite his obvious fatigue. Admiral Cronshu, we're here to discuss the future of both our peoples. Cronshu's mandibles clicked. Indeed, the death of Janus has created opportunities for all of us. As the discussions began, Evelyn studied the alien leader. There was cunning in those alien eyes, yes, but also something she hadn't expected. Hope. As the negotiations aboard Cronshu's cruiser concluded, Will Bennett stood at the viewport, watching the stars streak by. The weight of their fragile alliance pressed down on his shoulders. He turned to Dr. Evelyn Chen, her face etched with concern. We need to act fast, Will said, his voice low. The hardliners won't sit idle for long. Evelyn nodded, her fingers flying over a datapad. I've identified key leaders among the former slave races. If we can convince them to join us. It's a start, Will agreed. But we need the moderate Ladosian houses too. Cronshu can't hold power without their support. The door hissed open, and Cronshu entered. His towering form dwarfed the humans, mandibles clicking as he spoke. Your plan has merit, Commander Bennett. I will dispatch emissaries immediately. Will straightened his back. With your permission, Admiral, I'd like to lead one of those missions myself. Cronshu's eyes flashed. Granted. Choose your team wisely, human. The fate of our alliance may rest on your words. Days later, Will stood before the assembled council of House Vornak, one of the most influential moderate Ladosian factions. The chamber buzzed with tension, alien eyes boring into him from all sides. Esteemed members of House Vornak, Will began, fighting to keep his voice steady. I come before you today with an unprecedented opportunity. A Ladosian elder cut him off, mandibles flaring. Opportunity? You stand here, reeking of Janus's blood, and speak of opportunity? Will took a deep breath, pressing on. Yes, an opportunity to forge a new path, one of cooperation, not conquest. Meanwhile, across the sector, Evelyn faced her own challenges. She sat across from Jarakal, leader of the Centauri, a race long enslaved by the Ladosians. His tentacles writhed with barely contained rage. You ask us to ally with our oppressors, Jarakal hissed, after centuries of torment. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice filled with conviction. I ask you to help shape a new future, one where your people have a voice. Back on Cronshu's flagship, alarms blared. A junior officer burst onto the bridge. Admiral, Loyalist fleets have launched simultaneous attacks across 3 sectors. Cronshu's eyes narrowed. Pratheon. He moves faster than we anticipated. He turned to his communications officer. Recall Commander Bennett. We need him for a special operation. Days later, Will crouched in the shadows of Pratheon's battle station, his strike team poised for action. The cramped corridor reeked of ozone and alien sweat. Will's heart pounded as he checked his weapon one last time. On my mark, he whispered into his comm. 3, 2, 1, go. They burst from cover, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Ladosian defenders fell before their onslaught. Will vaulted over a barricade, his boots clanging on the metal deck as he sprinted towards the command center. The doors exploded inward. Will rolled into the room, coming up with his weapon trained on a towering figure. Pratheon stood before him, psionic energy crackling around his massive form. You dare? Pratheon roared, hurling a blast of pure force. Will dove aside, the energy scorching the deck where he'd stood. He fired, his shots absorbed by Pratheon's shields. For agonizing minutes, they traded fire, neither gaining the upper hand. Suddenly, Cronshu materialized behind Pratheon, psionic inhibitors gleaming in his hands. The loyalist leader howled as Cronshu clamped the devices onto his exoskeleton. Pratheon collapsed, his powers neutralized. In the aftermath, Will resumed his diplomatic efforts with renewed vigor. Evelyn redoubled her outreach to former slave races. Slowly, painfully, progress was made. Moderate Ladosian houses, impressed by Will's role in Pratheon's capture, began to listen. Former slave populations, seeing Cronshu's willingness to share power, cautiously offered support. Months passed. Will stood before a gathering of human and alien allies, his uniform crisp despite the weariness in his eyes. We've come far, he said, but our greatest challenge lies ahead. He gestured to the vast cryo bays visible through the viewport, where millions of human colonists slumbered, unaware of the changed galaxy that awaited them. How do we tell them, Will asked, his voice heavy, that everything they knew is gone, that their greatest enemy is now our only hope for survival? Will Bennett stood before the Human Leadership Council, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion etched on his face. Dr. Evelyn Chen sat beside him, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. We have no choice, Will said, his voice firm. The Ladosian Commonwealth is our best hope for survival. Counselor Reyes banged his head on the table. You expect us to trust the very monsters who nearly wiped us out? I expect us to adapt, Will countered, or we'll be extinct. The council chamber erupted in heated debate. Will caught snippets of argument. Can't trust them. What other option do we have? It's suicide. Hours later, the council reached its reluctant decision. Will would present Cronshu's proposal to the awakening colonists. In the vast cryo bays, the first pods hissed open. Disoriented colonists stumbled out, blinking in the harsh light. Medical teams rushed to stabilize them as Will stepped forward. Welcome back, he began. There's much to tell you. A man interrupted, his voice hoarse from disuse. Where are we? This isn't New Eden. Will took a deep breath. No, it's not. Earth is gone. We've been at war with an alien race called the Ladosians, but now... Aliens? A woman shrieked. You woke us up to fight aliens? No, Will said. I woke you up because we have a chance at peace. The news spread like wildfire through the awakening colonists. Shock turned to anger. In the habitat modules, crowds gathered, their voices rising in fury. Death to the aliens, they chanted. Avenge Earth. Will and Evelyn hurried through the corridors, security teams flanking them. A rock smashed into the wall beside Will's head. Traitor, someone screamed. They barely made it to the command center, locking the doors behind them. This isn't working, Evelyn said, her face pale. They're not ready. Will nodded grimly. Then we make them ready. He activated the colony-wide broadcast system. His face appeared on screens throughout the habitat. I know you're afraid, he began. I know you're angry. But listen to me. We have a chance to break the cycle of violence that's nearly destroyed us all. He spoke of Earth's fall, of the brutal war that followed, of the suffering on both sides. We can keep fighting until there's nothing left, Will said. Or we can build something new, something better. Slowly, the shouting outside began to quiet. People listened. In the following days, more colonists awakened. The initial fury gave way to cautious curiosity. Will organized town halls, answering questions for hours on end. Then came a turning point. Captain Sarah Chen, hero of the Battle of Proxima Centauri, emerged from cryo sleep. She stood beside Will at his next address. "I've seen the proposals," she said, her voice carrying the weight of legend. "This Commonwealth could work. It's a risk, yes, but it's a risk we must take." Her words swayed thousands. Other revered figures followed suit. Still, pockets of resistance remained. Will received daily death threats. Security teams thwarted 2 assassination attempts on Evelyn. Then came the moment that changed everything. Kronshu's massive form appeared on the colony's screens. The alien leader bowed his head. "Humans," he said, his voice rumbling, "we have wronged you grievously. There can be no excuse for the atrocities committed under Janus. But I stand before you now, asking not for forgiveness, but for a chance to forge a new path together." The colonists watched in stunned silence as the fearsome Ladosian continued, outlining his vision for a united galaxy. When the broadcast ended, the mood shifted palpably. Discussions in the habitat took on a new tone. Hope began to displace fear. Days later, Will stood before the assembled colonial representatives. The vote was cast. By a narrow margin, they agreed to join the Commonwealth. As cheers erupted around him, Will's eyes found the dissenting voters. Their faces were hard, their eyes full of hate. He knew the battle was just getting started. The fragile peace Will Bennett had fought so hard to forge teetered on the edge of collapse. In the dim light of his quarters, he pored over intelligence reports, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. The words on the screen blurred together, but one phrase stood out starkly. Joint Human Ladosian Terror Cell. Will's hand trembled as he reached for his comm unit. "Dr. Chen, my quarters. Now." Minutes later, Evelyn burst through the door, her lab coat askew. "What is it?" Will gestured to the screen. "We've got a problem." As Evelyn read, her face paled. "This can't be right. Human supremacists working with Janus loyalists? It doesn't make sense." "Hate makes strange bedfellows," Will said grimly. "They're planning to hit our starbases. We need to move." Alarms blared through the station. Will and Evelyn sprinted down corridors, security teams falling in behind them. They burst onto the command deck, where chaos reigned. "Report," Will barked. A young officer looked up, his face ashen. "Sir, we've detected unauthorized access to reactor control systems on multiple starbases. They're trying to trigger a breach." Will's mind raced. "Lock down all reactor rooms. I want strike teams ready to deploy in 5 minutes." He turned to Evelyn. "You're with me. We're going in." The shuttle bay was a flurry of activity as human and Ladosian soldiers prepped for combat. Will strapped on his armor, the weight familiar yet unwelcome. How many more battles would it take? Their strike force hit Starbase Omega hard and fast. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as they fought their way through corridors. Will ducked behind a bulkhead, the acrid smell of ozone filling his nostrils. "Push forward," he shouted, leading the charge into the next chamber. They cleared room after room, neutralizing terror cells with brutal efficiency. But as they approached the reactor core, Will's calm crackled to life. "Commander Bennett, we've got a problem. Enemy boarding craft just launched from the lower hangars. They're armed and running hot." Will's blood ran cold. "How many?" "At least 5, sir. They've already made the jump to FTL." He shared a look with Evelyn. They both knew what those ships carried and where they were headed. "All units, fall back to your ships," Will ordered. "We've got colonists to save." The bridge of Will's flagship hummed with tension as they gave chase. Tactical displays showed the enemy vessels screaming toward human worlds, their reactor cores pulsing with deadly energy. Where the hell is Cronshu? Will muttered. As if in answer, space rippled as a massive Ladosian battle group dropped out of FTL. At its head, Cronshu's command ship dwarfed the others. Commander Bennett, Cronshu's voice boomed over the comms. We stand ready to end this threat. The Allied fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Will watched in awe as human and Ladosian ships fought side by side, united against a common foe. But as they closed in on the lead enemy vessel, something changed. Cronshu's attacks became hesitant, his shots going wide. "What are you doing?" Will shouted. "Take the shot!" Cronshu's voice was pained. I can't. The captain, it's Thraskalu, my brother." Will's heart sank as he saw the enemy ship slip past their defensive line, streaking toward the nearest human world. He knew what he had to do. "All hands, brace for impact," he said quietly. Then he fired up the engines and gave chase. As Will's ship closed the distance, he could see the payload beginning to detonate. With a silent prayer, he rammed Thraskalu's vessel, altering its course away from the planet. The last thing Will Bennett saw was a blinding flash of light as the reactors went critical. In that moment, he knew his sacrifice would not be in vain. The Alliance would endure. Humanity and Ladosians alike would...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.